Spring of 1990, one of the subjects that was breaking up during that period of time in 1990 were crop formations. They were on 60 Minutes, they were on 2020. Barbara Walters was talking about how are these incredibly beautiful patterns being put down 800,000 feet long in wheat fields or barley fields or rape fields, especially in England. But that year, a lot of people don't realize, I counted the number of countries, and we had crop formations being photographed in 23 countries, 1990. So by 1991, I wanted to get to England. I wanted to be able to spend time in the formations. I wanted to see what it felt like. And by the summer of 1992, I finally was landing in London and was taken to Marlborough to get to where I was going to be staying in the Vale of Pewsey. For 2,000 years, the cereal crops in the Vale of Pewsey in England have been associated always with the cycles of planting and harvesting. For 2,000 years, the same land has been a home to all kinds of crops. So this has been the heart of where crop formations first emerged in the 1970s. A few people knew about them, and then by 88 and 1989 were the first what they called pictograms. Some of them were 750 feet long, 800 feet long. They were largely circles with lines and odd symbols coming off of the lines. By 1992, when I landed and got to the Vale of Pewsey, everything was evolving into very sophisticated patterns. There were beginning to be people who were recognizing that there was mathematical language in these crop formations. And I had not been in a formation. I had studied hundreds from the United States. And so the first thing that I wanted to do, and I joined up with friends, is to organize getting into a crop formation. And I had arrived at night, and it was the next morning. 7 of us went to one at Milk Hill, a place that's had a spectacular formation every year since around 1989. And when we got there, we parked in an area where we could park cars on a hill, and then we had to go as a group along the top of Milk Hill in order to get up above a 430-foot, I believe it was, huge. It was spirals, paths, big circles. It was not a pictogram. It was like a geometry. And I remember getting up, and we got to a point right above, and some of the people who were more experienced, they said, we've got to come down where we can go down a tram line so we don't trample any of the wheat. And we all, like children, for reasons unknown, were on a hill, but we all started sort of running. And we ran all the way down into the Milk Hill tram line, going right along the Milk Hill formation. Now, there were about 7 of us. I just happened, for some reason, to be the person who was at the furthest. So I am going down the tram line the furthest this way, and everybody else was kind of spread around along here, 400 feet, bigger than a football field. I had my 35 millimeter camera hanging around my neck, and I had the curiosity to go right into this formation. I wanted to see, what does it feel like to be in it? And so I'm walking with tremendous innocence, my first pattern ever on Earth, and I get to an opening, and it was like I hit a wall of jello. It actually was firm and made me kind of like I bumped into a wall. I'm not seeing a wall. I'm not seeing anything but air, but I could feel there was this solidness, and I stopped, puzzled. I looked down. The others had stopped. Nobody was going into this pattern. So I brought my 35 millimeter up. I put it so I could change and go down real close and come back in wide, and I started taking photographs, and I realized when I went into a zoom in a particular place only about 5 feet from where I was blocked by this whatever, jello, I could see wheat this direction, wheat this direction. I could see another layer, and I thought, oh my Lord, I want to get in there. This thing is layered. And after about another minute or two, whatever this strange jello that had blocked apparently all of us, it just kind of evaporated. And then I felt almost like I was being invited into the crop formation at that point. I didn't want to step on anything. So I went on tippy-toe for a while, like in a circle, trying to see how can I get close, how can I get photographs of the layers. And finally, my curiosity overwhelmed my desire not to step on any of this crop. And I, sort of on my tiptoes, I went to what I had been trying to photograph. And I got down on my hands and knees. I put my hand, here was the top layer, here was the layer going this direction. Here was another layer, and it went down 7 layers, all opposite directions. And then my fingers, I could feel the soil. I could feel the soil coming under my fingernails as I did this, and realized that the top of the formation that was going like this all the way down was about up to maybe 12 inches. That from the soil up, this pattern was spread for 430 some feet with all of these layers. And there were not even layers. There were areas where it swirled like water in circles. There were all kinds of exquisite, nothing was out of place. It was breathtaking. And then I felt this pull to go to the right. Everybody else had gone to the far end, and at 430 feet, I'm that far away, they're that far away, but I'm pulled to the right. And as I'm walking, I'm trying to walk on the edge of my toes. But as I'm walking to go to this far end that seems to be pulling me, I'm realizing that the complexity of those 7 layers and these beautiful swirls, it's continuing all of the way. And I get to the end. It's wheat that was about waist high. I'm now at the edge that you can't go any further. And here is solid, solid wheat, like you were inside of a velvet carpet, but it's wheat. And as I'm standing there, looking out on the solid wheat, and then looking in at the complexity of all of these layers, and then back out onto this wheat, it was like a thought voice. It said, life on earth is not guaranteed. And I turned again, and as I turned to look out on the wheat with life on earth is not guaranteed, suddenly it was like when you're in the presence of something like a Bengal tiger. And the Bengal tiger can be 20 feet away from you in a zoo or a safari park, and you're protected. But when you look into the eyes of a Bengal tiger, there is not only profound intelligence, but a sense of danger, because the intelligence is capable of doing anything. And at that moment, looking out on that wheat, it was as if a Bengal tiger was staring back at me. And I remember that moment. This is what made this pattern. This is an intelligence that is capable of destroying us or letting us live. Life on earth is not guaranteed. And it was at that moment that every crop formation that I was ever in by the hundreds for the next decade, that voice was always there, that sense, this is really important. These crop formations have mathematical language. If we were smart enough, we would all be sharing what is the language in these crop formations, and praying that that Bengal tiger intelligence knew that a lot of us actually cared about whether we survive on Earth or not. Back in 1992, during my first trip to England, as I began moving into crop formations and feeling them out, a lot of us started saying, you know, this formation, it feels really positive and I feel good, but I was in that one over on the barn road, and it felt terrible. And that made me start thinking, what if there are two types of energy, two types of intelligences that are even competing with each other in the crops of the world, like the skin of the world? And that where we feel really good in some, it may be something that is trying to inspire us, to give us joy, to give us exaltation, which I felt in those crop formations. And those that made me feel sick or that made me stop, that was the beginning of these crop formations are not equal. Not all are positive and not all are negative, but when they are negative, it had a physical impact on the body and I think the mind and the soul that many of us who came to go to crop formations together would have this moment where this I have to leave. Now, what else was interesting about this? I began to realize that over the 10 or 12 years that I kept going to England, that the crop formations, if this was going to happen, where you felt like you were sucked of air, it was going to be in something like an 8-fold geometry or a 5-fold geometry or maybe an 11-fold. It was never a 3, it was never a 6, it was never a 7, and it was never a 9. And in the whole issue of sigils and ancient geometries and mathematical laws being underneath the sacred geometry, it was one of those evolutions that people who were mathematicians began to study in detail and put on websites what they were finding in terms of mathematical ratios and crop formations. And eventually, I remember one of the first dialogues I had with people. Did you ever feel that when you were in an 8-fold geometry that it was different than the 6-fold geometry across the field? And there had been one specific example where there were 6 or 7 of us, and there had been a windmill hill, and there had been an 8-fold geometry, and then in the field right opposite, it was a 6-fold. And all of us who had gone into the 8-fold geometry, when we got into the 6-fold, everybody was saying, there is a difference. Could it be that those behind certain geometries, whatever the intelligence, are in conflict with everything that is behind the 3, the 6, the 9, the 7 geometry? You will see that the flower of life, which begins with 3s that go to 6s, that go to 9s, that is associated with what is called the light or the Christ line. If you go to the 8, that 8 geometry is associated with Mesopotamia and ancient sigils, as if math, numbers, associations with things in the unseen are part of the fabric of what is behind the crop formations that have occurred on this planet. It may be subtle to many people, but the challenge is we need to understand why it is that a place like Glastonbury, with the red and white springs that have been going since, they say, for 2,000 years, and that Arimathea brought Christ there, and that there is a relationship between this land where crop formations seem to have focused. Could it be that it isn't just math, that it isn't just something from another intelligence, that the crop formations themselves go to the heart of something that is trying to get human attention, that the soul of humanity is at stake, that life is not guaranteed, and that the crop formations seem to be spelling out that there is conflict between light and dark, numbers and mathematical language. And that has always been with me ever since I spent so much time in them, that it goes beyond beauty, it goes beyond poetry, it goes beyond mathematical language. But the crop formations that began coming to this planet in the 1970s have something to do with a philosophical argument about what is allowable to do with life. And that the crop formations, to me, today in 2017, the crop formations have always been like a signal. I've always felt they were a signal. We have a path that we can go to life, or we have a path we can go to death. And something like that Bengal tiger intelligence is watching, provoking, waiting, and I hope inspiring